The alarm screamed through Station Havelock like a dying animal. Doyen dropped his welding torch and grabbed the safety rail as the entire corridor shook. Red emergency lights flooded everything, making the metal walls look like they were covered in blood. All personnel, this is Commander Yaris. We have a code black in the xenobiology wing. Repeat, code black. Multiple dangerous specimens have escaped containment. Evacuate sectors 7 through 12 immediately. Doyen's stomach dropped. Code black meant something that could kill. Station Havelock orbited a massive gas giant and hosted scientists from across the galaxy. Today it was also hosting a major xenobiology conference, which meant the station was packed with dangerous creatures from hundreds of worlds. He ran toward the maintenance hub, his boots clanging on the metal floor. Other crew members rushed past him, some human, some not. A Hellion security officer made of living crystal sprinted by, his body flashing with internal light. Behind him came 3 insectoid Krath, their 6 legs clicking rapidly. Doyen reached the hub and checked his tablet. The structural sensors showed damage in Storage Bay 14. That was his sector. He had to make sure no one was trapped there. Doyen, don't go that way. His supervisor Jiwan called over the radio. Security says the Vrakoth cubs are loose in that area. Vrakoth. Doyen had seen pictures. They were massive predators from a death world, like tigers but twice as large and 3 times as mean. And these were just the cubs. I have to check for structural damage, Doyen replied. The bay might decompress. G1 was silent for a moment. Be careful. Those things have claws that can cut through steel. Doyen grabbed his emergency kit and headed toward Bay 14. The corridors were empty now. Everyone had evacuated. He could hear something in the distance, a sound between a growl and a scream. It made his skin crawl. The door to Bay 14 was torn open. Not unlocked, torn open. The metal was peeled back like paper. Doyen swallowed hard and stepped through. The bay was a mess. Supply containers were scattered everywhere. Some were ripped open, their contents spilled across the floor, and in the center of the chaos, huddled together near a support beam, were 6 of the largest cubs Doyen had ever seen. They were massive. Each one was easily 200 pounds, covered in dark fur marked with stripes. Their eyes glowed yellow in the emergency lighting. One of them saw Doyen and snarled, showing teeth as long as his fingers. Doyen froze. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct told him to run, to get out while he still could. These creatures could tear him apart in seconds. But then he noticed something. The cubs weren't attacking. They were huddled together, their bodies pressed against each other. One of them was shaking. Another made a small, high-pitched sound that didn't match its size at all. They were terrified. Doyen had volunteered at an animal rescue back on Earth before joining the station crew. He'd seen scared animals before. The way they showed their teeth wasn't always aggression. Sometimes it was fear. These cubs didn't want to hurt anyone. They were just scared children, lost in a strange place. He slowly lowered himself to the ground, sitting cross-legged about 15 feet from them. He made himself as small as possible, non-threatening. The cubs watched him, their growls continuing but not getting louder. Hey there, Doyen said softly. It's okay. You're scared, right? This place is loud and strange. The cubs didn't understand his words, but they responded to his tone. One of them tilted its massive head, confused. Doyen reached into his emergency kit and pulled out a ration bar. It wasn't much, but it was food. He broke off a piece and tossed it gently toward the cubs. It landed a few feet in front of them. The smallest cub, the one that had been shaking, stretched its neck forward and sniffed. Then it ate the piece in one bite. Doyen tossed another piece. This time 2 cubs ate. He kept his movements slow and gentle, never making eye contact for too long. Staring was a threat in most predator species, that's it, he whispered. See, I'm not going to hurt you. Over the radio he could hear security planning their assault. They were going to use stun weapons and nets. Doyen knew that would just terrify the cubs more. They might hurt themselves trying to escape or hurt the security team. Commander Yaris, Doyen said into his radio, keeping his voice calm and quiet. I'm in Bay 14. I have the cubs here. Don't send security yet. What? Doyen, get out of there now. Those creatures are extremely dangerous. They're scared children, Doyen replied. Give me 20 minutes. I think I can get them to follow me back to containment. There was a long pause. You're insane. You have 15 minutes before we come in. Your life signs better stay stable. Doyen kept feeding the cubs piece by piece. They crept closer to him. The smallest one came within 5 feet. Doyen could smell it, a mix of fur and something wild. It made a small chirping sound, almost like a question. "You want more?" Doyen asked. He held out another piece on his flat palm. The small cub stretched forward and took it, its teeth brushing his hand but not biting. Up close, Doyen could see its eyes more clearly. They were yellow like fire, but they weren't cold or evil. They were just eyes. Young eyes. The other cubs watched. If the small one trusted this strange creature, maybe they could too. Slowly, over the next 10 minutes, Doyen got all 6 cubs to eat from his hand. They surrounded him now, their massive bodies close enough to touch. He carefully stood up, moving very slowly. The cubs tensed but didn't run. "Okay," Doyen said. "Let's get you home." He started walking toward the door, then looked back. The cubs watched him. He made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, something he used to call dogs back on Earth. The smallest cub took a step forward, then another. The others followed. Doyen walked through the corridors with 6 massive predator cubs trailing behind him like ducklings. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right. They trusted him. He had to protect that trust. When he reached the xenobiology wing, he found a crowd waiting. Security officers with weapons drawn, scientists with scanning equipment, and at the front, 2 of the largest creatures Doyen had ever seen. The adult Verkoth made the cubs look tiny. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in scars and muscle. Their claws gleamed like knives. These were War Master Threx and his mate, the cubs' parents. Threx stared at Doyen with eyes that had seen countless battles. Behind the human, his cubs walked peacefully, unharmed and calm. "You," Threx rumbled, his voice like thunder. "You calmed my children when armed warriors could not." How Doyen shrugged, feeling very small. "I just talked to them, gave them food, showed them I wasn't a threat." The cubs ran to their parents, making happy chirping sounds. Threx's mate checked each one carefully, looking for injuries. Finding none, she looked at Doyen with something that might have been respect. Threx stepped forward. Every security officer tensed, but the War Master simply bowed his massive head. "The Verkoth do not forget such service," he said. "You have done what I thought impossible. You have my gratitude, human Doyen." As Doyen was led away for medical checks, he didn't know that this moment would change everything. He didn't know that he'd just started something that would spread across the entire galaxy. He just knew that those cubs had needed help, and he'd been there to give it. Sometimes that was enough. 3 days after the incident, Doyen was summoned to the station's diplomatic hall. He'd never been inside before. It was huge, with ceilings that stretched up 3 floors and walls made of transparent metal that showed the gas giant outside. Representatives from dozens of species sat in specialized seats designed for their different body types. At the center stood War Master Threx and his mate. They wore formal armor now, decorated with symbols Doyen didn't recognize. Between them sat their 6 cubs, surprisingly well-behaved. Ambassador G1 met Doyen at the entrance. She was wearing her formal uniform, which meant this was serious. Her expression was tight, controlled. "They asked for you specifically," G1 said quietly. "The Vrakoth delegation has made a request to the Coalition Council. It involves you." "What kind of request?" Doyen asked. G1 didn't answer. She just led him to the center of the hall. Threx watched Doyen approach. The War Master's eyes were intelligent, calculating. This wasn't just a grateful parent. This was a warrior and politician. "Human Doyen," Threx began, his voice carrying through the entire hall. "3 days ago you achieved what our own guards could not. You calmed my children when they were lost in fear and confusion. You showed them kindness when others showed them only weapons." Doyen shifted uncomfortably. Every species in the hall was watching him. "I just helped," Doyen said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Threx's mate said. Her voice was softer than her partner's, but no less powerful. "They would not. Our own people could not approach the cubs. The security forces failed. Only you succeeded," Threx stepped forward. "My mate and I must attend conferences across the galaxy for the next 6 months. We have duties we cannot abandon. But we cannot bring our cubs to every dangerous location. They are too young, too unpredictable." Doyen was starting to understand where this was going. His stomach tightened. "We need a caretaker," Threx continued. "Someone who can manage them when we cannot. Someone they trust." He paused, then spoke words that made the entire hall erupt in noise. "We want you, Doyen, to be that caretaker." The hall exploded with voices. Representatives from different species shouted in dozens of languages. Some sounded angry, others shocked. A few even sounded approving. Commander Yaris, the crystalline Helian security chief, stood up. His body flashed with agitated colors. "This violates Coalition protocol. Article 47, Section 12 clearly states that offspring of member species cannot be cared for by incompatible species. The risk is too great," a reptilian delegate agreed. "Humans are soft species. They lack natural weapons. What if the cubs become aggressive? The human will be killed." "Exactly why this should not happen," another voice added. "It sets a dangerous precedent." But there were other voices too. A delegate from the insectoid Krath clicked thoughtfully. "The human showed unique ability. Perhaps we should study this before dismissing it." Jiwan stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "Honored delegates, this request is highly unusual. However, the Vrakoth are valued members of the Coalition. Perhaps we should consider a trial period, with proper oversight and safety measures." Doyen wanted to speak, to say he was just a maintenance worker, not a professional caretaker. But Jiwan shot him a warning look. He understood. This was bigger than him now. This was politics. The debate continued for an hour. Finally, the council voted. With strict conditions, Doyen would be allowed to care for the cubs for 1 month. If anything went wrong, the arrangement would end immediately. After the meeting, Jiwan pulled Doyen aside. They walked to an observation deck overlooking the gas giant. "You don't have to do this," Jiwan said. "I can tell the council you decline." "But you don't want me to decline," Doyen replied. Jiwan sighed. "You're right. I don't. Do you know how long humans have been part of the Coalition? 80 years. That's nothing. Some species have been members for thousands of years. We're still trying to prove we belong." She looked at him directly. "This could be huge for humanity. If you can do this, if you can show that humans have unique abilities valuable to the Coalition, it changes everything. And if I fail? If something goes wrong? Then we look like fools who overestimated ourselves," Jiwan admitted. "But I've seen your file. You worked animal rescue for 10 years before coming here. You have more experience with dangerous creatures than anyone else on this station. If anyone can do this, it's you." Doyen looked out at the swirling storms on the gas giant. "I'll do it. But not for politics. Those cubs were scared. If I can help them feel safe, that's what matters," Jiwan smiled. "That's exactly why you'll succeed." The next morning, Doyen reported to the special habitat that had been prepared for the cubs. It was huge, with climbing structures and different temperature zones. The cubs were already there, exploring their new space. Sharon, the Vrakoth cub keeper who normally handled the young, met him at the entrance. She was smaller than Threx, only 7 feet tall, but her expression was cold. "I do not approve of this," Sharon said bluntly. "You are not Vrakoth. You do not understand our ways. These cubs need a proper keeper, not a soft alien who got lucky once." "I understand," Doyen said calmly. "Will you teach me your ways?" "I want to learn." Sharon seemed surprised by the response. She studied him for a long moment. "You admit you need teaching?" "Of course. I don't know anything about raising Vrakoth cubs. I only know how to help scared animals. If you teach me your culture, I can do better." Something shifted in Sharon's expression. "Very well. First lesson. Vrakoth cubs establish hierarchy through play fighting. The strongest leads. But they are young and do not always control their strength. You must teach them control without breaking their spirit." Over the next week, Doyen learned. He learned that the cubs needed to hunt, so he created games where they stalked mechanical toys. He learned that they needed to fight, so he wore protective gear and let them practice their pouncing. He learned their individual personalities. The smallest cub, who Threx allowed him to call Whisper, was shy but clever. She solved puzzles faster than her siblings. The largest Blaze was bold and protective of the others. Storm was always moving, never still. Shadow liked to hide and ambush. Ember was the most aggressive, always testing boundaries. Ghost was quiet and thoughtful, often watching before acting. Sharon watched him work with the cubs. Slowly, her cold expression thawed. One day, as Doyen wrestled gently with Blaze, teaching the cub to control his bite strength, she spoke. "You are better than I expected," Sharon admitted. "The cubs are calmer with you than they have been in months. Even Ember listens to you." "They just needed someone who wasn't afraid of them," Doyen said. "Everyone else saw dangerous predators." "I see children." News of Doyen's success spread through the station and beyond. Scientists began requesting access to observe. But more importantly, other species started paying attention. One evening, as Doyen was settling the cubs for sleep, he noticed a group of aliens watching from the observation window. They were chiral, wolf-like creatures who stood on two legs but kept their predatory features. One of them, larger than the others and wearing ornate clothing, stared at him with intense interest. The next day, Jiwan contacted him urgently. The chiral delegation wants to meet with you. Their leader, Pack Mother Venra, has a request. What kind of request? Doyen asked, though he already suspected. She wants you to meet her son. When Doyen met Pack Mother Venra, she was direct. My son was injured in an accident 6 months ago. Since then, he has been aggressive, fearful. Our own healers cannot reach him. He attacks anyone who comes close. Her eyes were desperate. I watched what you did with the Vrakoth cubs. I know this violates protocols. I know I should not ask. But I am a mother before I am a leader. Will you try to help him? Doyen looked at Jiwan. She shook her head slightly. This wasn't approved. It could cause problems. But Doyen thought of a scared young creature alone with his pain and fear. He thought of how the Vrakoth cubs had needed someone to see past their teeth and claws to the frightened children underneath. I'll try, he said. He didn't know that. This simple agreement would start a wave that would change the entire galaxy. Pack Mother Venra's son was named Tahir. He was young for a chiral, maybe equivalent to a human 10-year-old, but he was still dangerous. The scars across his face told the story of the accident, a shuttle crash that killed 3 other cubs. Tahir had survived, but something inside him had broken. Doyen met him in a secure room. Tahir was chained to the wall, his gray fur matted and dull. When he saw Doyen, he snarled and lunged. The chains held him back, but Doyen could see the desperation in the young chiral's eyes. Everyone leave, Doyen said quietly. The chiral guards looked at Pack Mother Venra. She hesitated, then nodded. They left, but Doyen knew they were watching through cameras. He sat down on the floor, far enough from Tahir that the chains wouldn't reach him. The young chiral growled constantly, a low rumble of warning. Hey, Doyen said softly. My name is Doyen. I'm not going to hurt you. Tahir snapped his jaws but said nothing. I heard about the crash, Doyen continued. I heard about your friends who died. That must be scary, surviving when others didn't. Maybe you feel guilty. Maybe you're angry. Tahir's growling changed, became more uncertain. When I was young, Doyen said, I had a friend. We went hiking together. There was an accident. He fell. I tried to catch him, but I wasn't strong enough. He paused, the old pain still fresh. For a long time, I was angry at everything. At myself most of all. Tahir stopped growling. His yellow eyes watched Doyen carefully. The thing is, Doyen said, being angry didn't change what happened. It just made me more alone. And I think maybe you're very alone right now. Something in Tahir's expression cracked. A small whimper escaped his throat. Doyen spent 3 hours with Tahir that first day. He didn't try to touch him or remove the chains. He just talked, and slowly Tahir began to respond. First with body language, then with small sounds, finally with words. They all died, Tahir whispered. I should have died too. But you didn't, Doyen said gently. You survived. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to honor. You can live for them, carry their memory. Over the next 2 weeks, Doyen visited Tahir every day. Slowly, the young chiral calmed. He stopped trying to attack. He started eating properly. He even laughed once when Doyen told him a stupid joke. Pack Mother Venra watched each session. On the 15th day, she called Doyen to her quarters. You have done what our best healers could not, she said. Tahir talks now. He sleeps without nightmares. He asks for you. She paused. How? What did you do that we could not? Doyen thought carefully. I think maybe it's because I'm not chiral. Tahir felt like he failed his pack. Every time he saw another chiral, he was reminded of that failure. But I'm different. I'm not part of his world. So he could talk to me without feeling that weight. Venra nodded slowly. You have a gift, human. A strange gift, but valuable. Word spread quickly. Within a month, 3 more predator species approached Doyen. A Rakath ambassador whose daughter had become violent after witnessing a battle. A Theran father whose son refused to leave his room after losing his siblings to disease. A Vex mother whose children had been kidnapped and rescued, but were now afraid of everything. Doyen couldn't help them all himself. He was just one person. But other humans began volunteering. Engineers, scientists, even diplomats. They watched what Doyun did and started trying it themselves. Dr. Minho, a human xenopsychologist on the station, became fascinated. He approached Doyun one day with a tablet full of data. "Look at this," Minho said excitedly. "I've been studying the pattern. Do you know what all these cases have in common? The young aliens all respond to humans in similar ways. Calmer heart rates, reduced stress hormones, increased trust behaviors. Maybe they're just good kids who needed help," Doyun suggested. "No, it's more than that." Minho pulled up charts and graphs. "I measured your stress response when you're with the Vrakoth cubs. Your cortisol drops, but your oxytocin spikes. That's the bonding hormone. But here's the interesting part. It spikes even though the cubs aren't human. Your brain treats them like they're your own young. So humans are just naturally parental?" "More than that," Minho said. "Humans respond to distress cues across species. Big eyes, high-pitched sounds, clumsy movements. Your species evolved to care for vulnerable young, and that instinct doesn't seem limited to human children. It's universal." Over the next 3 months, the phenomenon grew. 43 humans on the station were now working with young aliens from predator species. An unofficial network formed with humans sharing techniques and advice. But not everyone was happy about it. Commander Yaris called a Security Council meeting. Doyun was required to attend. The crystalline Helion stood at the front of the room, his body flashing angry reds and oranges. "This has gone too far," Yaris declared. "We have humans interacting with dangerous species offspring without proper oversight, without training, without understanding the cultural implications. The parents are approving these arrangements," Ji-won argued. "They're requesting human help." "Today they request help," a reptilian delegate said. "Tomorrow they may accuse humans of stealing their young, of changing them. This could become a massive diplomatic incident." A insectoid delegate clicked in agreement. "My species has watched this trend with concern. What are humans doing to these young? Are they manipulating them? Programming them to favor humans over their own kind?" "That's ridiculous," Minho said, standing up. "I've done extensive research. The humans aren't manipulating anyone. They're simply providing comfort and patience. The young aliens remain loyal to their own species. They don't prefer humans over their parents." "Then explain why so many predator species are suddenly dependent on human caretakers," Yaris challenged. The room erupted in argument. Doyun sat quietly, feeling overwhelmed. This wasn't what he wanted. He just wanted to help scared kids. Then Pack Mother Venra stood. The room fell silent. The Kirill leader commanded respect. "My son was dying," Venra said simply. "Not in body, but in spirit. Your healers tried to help. They failed. Your security tried to contain him. They failed. Then this human, this soft creature that my son could have killed with one bite, sat with him, talked with him, saved him." She looked around the room. "You speak of manipulation, of dependence. I speak of a mother's gratitude. You debate protocols while humans do what we cannot. Reach the unreachable." Another voice joined her. War Master Threx entered the room, his massive form filling the doorway. Behind him walked his 6 cubs, now larger and stronger than before. "My children have thrived under human care," Threx rumbled. "They are better behaved, better trained, happier than they were before. The human Doyun has taught them control without breaking their warrior spirit. He has done this better than our own cub keepers." He paused. "I do not give my trust easily, but I trust this human with my children's lives. That should tell you everything." Yaris was not convinced. "Trust is not the issue. Protocol is, safety is. What happens when a human fails? When a child is hurt or killed because we allowed this foolishness? Then we will deal with it," Venra said firmly. "But we will not punish success because we fear hypothetical failure. That is cowardice." The meeting ended without resolution, but the debate had begun, and it was spreading beyond the station. Ships carried the news to other stations, other worlds. Humans who could calm the fiercest predators' children. It sounded like a fairy tale, but more and more families were experiencing it firsthand. 3 months later, Doyun received a message that changed everything. It came from the Vrakoth homeworld. A plague had struck. It killed adult Vrakoth but left cubs alive. However, the disease caused the young to become hyper-aggressive, attacking anyone who came near. The Vrakoth healers couldn't get close enough to treat them. Cubs were dying because they couldn't receive care. The message was simple. "We need human volunteers. Please help our children." Doyun read the message 3 times. He thought of Whisper, Blaze, Storm, Shadow, Ember, and Ghost. He thought of Tahir. He thought of all the scared, hurting young ones he'd helped. Then he thought of cubs dying alone and afraid, too aggressive to be helped by their own people. He pressed the reply button. "I'm coming," he typed, "and I'm bringing others." The Vrakoth homeworld was called Cathara, and it was dying. From orbit, Doyen could see the massive cities below, but they were dark. No lights, no movement. The plague had spread so fast that entire regions were quarantined. 30 humans had volunteered to come with him. Engineers, scientists, doctors, even a few diplomats. They'd left their jobs and families to help children they'd never met, from a species that could kill them without effort. Hyejin stood next to Doyen as their shuttle descended. She was a pediatric nurse, one of the first volunteers to respond to his message. Her hands were steady as she checked her medical supplies for the third time. "Are you scared?" she asked him quietly. "Terrified," Doyen admitted. "You?" "Yes, but more scared of doing nothing." She looked out the window at the dark planet below. "Those cubs didn't ask for this. They deserve someone who'll try." The shuttle landed at a military facility on the outskirts of a major city. War Master Threx met them personally. His armor was scarred from battle and his eyes were haunted. "Thank you for coming," Threx said. "I know this is dangerous. I know you risk your lives. But we have no other options." He gestured for them to follow. They walked through corridors filled with Vrakoth warriors. These massive predators who feared nothing in combat looked at the humans with desperate hope. It was strange and humbling. Threx led them to a massive medical bay. Through reinforced windows they could see the infected cubs. There were hundreds of them, separated into different rooms. They threw themselves against walls, bit at anything that moved, screamed in rage and pain. "The disease attacks their nervous system," Threx explained. "It makes them feel constant pain and fear. They cannot recognize friend from enemy. Our healers tried to sedate them, but sedation weakens their immune response. Without treatment, 90% will die." A Vrakoth healer named Elder Cross approached. He was ancient, his fur gray with age, his body covered in scars from a lifetime of service. "I opposed bringing humans here," Cross said bluntly. "I thought it was foolish desperation. But I have watched all other options fail, so I will try this, though I do not understand it." He looked at Doyen. "How will you help them when they try to kill you?" "The same way I helped before," Doyen said. "With patience," Cross snorted. "Patience will not stop claws. Then we'll also use protective gear," Hyejin added. "And we'll work in teams. But most importantly, we'll remember that underneath the aggression, they're scared and hurting." The humans were given thick protective suits, reinforced to withstand bites and claws. They looked like armored spacesuits, bulky and awkward, but they would keep the volunteers alive long enough to work. Doyen entered the first isolation room with Hyejin and 2 other volunteers. Inside was a female cub, maybe 6 months old. She was smaller than the Vrakoth cubs he'd cared for on the station, but she was completely wild, throwing herself at the walls, screaming. "Hey there," Doyen said softly. "I know it hurts. I know you're scared." The cub launched herself at him. Her claws scraped across his suit, scratching but not penetrating. Doyen didn't fight back. He just stood there, letting her attack until she exhausted herself. When she finally stopped, panting and trembling, Doyen slowly sat down. "I'm not going to hurt you. I promise. We're here to help." Hyejin had a scanner ready. "She needs fluids immediately. Fever is dangerously high. Can you get close enough to give her an injection?" Doyen asked. "Not yet. She's too agitated," so they waited. Doyen kept talking, his voice soft and steady. He told the cub stories, described Earth, his childhood, anything to fill the silence with gentle sound. Hyejin hummed quietly a simple melody. It took 2 hours, but the cub finally approached them. She was still trembling, still in pain, but curiosity overcame fear. She sniffed at Doyen's suit. "That's it," Doyen whispered. "We're not so scary, right?" When Hyejin slowly reached out with the injection, the cub flinched but didn't attack. The needle went in, delivering medicine and fluids. The cub whimpered but allowed it. "Good girl," Hyejin said softly. "You're so brave." They spent 6 hours with that first cub. By the end, she was resting peacefully, her fever breaking. She didn't trust them completely, but she tolerated their presence. It was enough to provide treatment. Outside, Elder Cross watched through the window. His expression was unreadable. The work was brutal. Each cub required hours of patient, careful interaction. The humans worked in rotating shifts, never rushing, always gentle. They were bitten, scratched, thrown against walls. Every day brought new bruises and cuts, but every day more cubs were calmed enough to receive treatment. Doyen worked with the most violent cases. There was one cub, a male they called Fury, who had injured 3 Vrakoth healers so badly they needed surgery. He was scheduled to be euthanized because no one could get close enough to help him. Doyen spent 3 days in Fury's room. The cub attacked constantly. Doyen's suit was shredded, his body was battered, but he kept coming back. "I know you don't believe it," Doyen told the exhausted cub on the 3rd day, "but I'm not giving up on you. You deserve to live. You deserve to be free of this pain." On the 4th day, Fury finally let Doyen touch him. The cub collapsed into his arms, whimpering. For the first time since infection, someone was offering comfort instead of restraint. Hyejin developed new techniques. She discovered that rhythmic sounds helped calm the cubs. She started humming specific patterns, teaching them to the other volunteers. She found that certain touches, firm but gentle pressure along the spine, helped reduce the pain response. Other humans contributed their own innovations. An engineer named Borum created specialized feeding tubes that could be operated from outside the isolation rooms, ensuring cubs got nutrition even when they were too aggressive to eat. A linguist named Somin learned to interpret the cubs' different sounds, distinguishing pain cries from fear cries from aggression. After 2 months, the results were undeniable. Of the 847 infected cubs in the facility, 798 had survived. 94%. The Vrakoth healers had predicted less than 30% survival. Elder Cross called a meeting with Doyen and the human volunteers. The old healer's expression was no longer skeptical. "I did not believe," Cross admitted. "I thought you were soft creatures playing at heroism. I was wrong." He bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect among the Vrakoth. "You saved our children when we could not. You endured their violence with patience I did not think possible. You taught us that strength is not only in claws and teeth. We just did what needed doing," Doyen said. "No," Cross replied. "You did what we could not. That is different." He looked at each human in turn. "The Vrakoth do not give trust lightly. But you have earned it. All of you." But not everyone was celebrating. Back on Station Havelock and across the Coalition, the success on Cathara had sparked fierce debate. A corporate consortium called Helix United had reached out to human governments. They offered enormous amounts of money for humans to raise predator species offspring, specifically as soldiers. "Imagine," their proposal read, "warriors raised by humans from birth. Loyal, trained, perfect." The proposal horrified most humans and many Coalition members, but some saw opportunity. Some saw profit. Anti-human factions in the Coalition grew louder. They claimed humans were performing psychological manipulation on vulnerable young. They demanded legislation to ban humans from interacting with non-human juveniles entirely. Jiwan contacted Doyun while he was still on Cathara. Her face on the video screen looked exhausted. "There's going to be a major vote in the Coalition Council," she said. "They want to ban what you're doing, all of it. No more human caretakers, no more interaction with alien young, nothing." "But the cubs," Doyen protested. "Who will help them?" "That's not the Council's concern. They're worried about precedent, about exploitation, about humans having too much influence over the next generation of powerful species. So what do? Jiwan was quiet for a moment. "We fight. We make our case. And we hope enough species remember what you did here." Doyen looked out the window at the Vrakoth cubs playing in the recovery yard. They were healthy now, happy. "Without the human volunteers, most of them would be dead. Then we'll fight," he said. "These kids are worth fighting for." The Coalition Council chamber was the largest room Doyen had ever seen. Representatives from over 300 species filled the circular space, each in their own specialized environment. Some breathed different atmospheres. Some existed in tanks of liquid. Some were so different from humans that Doyen couldn't even understand how they perceived the world. At the center stood a platform where speakers presented their cases. Today, that platform would decide the future of everything Doyen and the other volunteers had built. The first speaker was a Helian legal expert. His crystalline body flashed with controlled colors as he presented the case against human involvement with alien young. "The evidence is clear," the Helian stated. "Humans have systematically inserted themselves into the most vulnerable aspect of species development, childhood. They have done this without proper oversight, without understanding long-term consequences and without regard for cultural boundaries. He projected images of humans with alien children. Today it is presented as charity. Tomorrow it could be colonization of a different kind. Control the children, control the species. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Next came the corporate representative from Helix United. He was human, which made his words even more damaging. Humans possess a unique ability, the representative said smoothly. An ability that has measurable, repeatable results. This ability has commercial and strategic value. Rather than ban it, we should regulate and monetize it. Allow controlled breeding programs where humans raise elite warriors from predator species. Think of the applications, the profit potential. The chamber erupted in angry noise. Even species that had been neutral now looked disgusted. The idea of breeding programs of turning the human ability into a commodity offended almost everyone. Jiwan stood to speak for the Human Diplomatic Corps. The coalition was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual benefit. Humans have offered help freely, without asking for payment or power. To ban this help because some might abuse it is to punish success out of fear. But Commander Yaris countered. We do not punish success. We prevent disaster. One accident, one child harmed in human care, and we will have interspecies war. The risk is too great. The debate raged for hours. Doyen sat in the observation area feeling helpless. This wasn't about logic or evidence. It was about fear and politics. Then Pack Mother Venra requested to speak. The chamber quieted. The Kirill leader's voice carried weight. My son tried to kill himself, Venra said bluntly. After the accident, after watching his friends die, he wanted to die too. Our healers tried everything. They failed. He grew worse, more violent, until we had to chain him like an animal. Her voice cracked slightly. Then a human sat with him, talked to him, saw him not as a problem to solve, but as a child in pain. That human saved my son's life. She paused, looking around the chamber. You debate risks and protocols. I understand. But I ask you to consider, what is the risk of doing nothing? How many children suffer right now because we are too afraid to accept help when it is offered? Elder Cross spoke next. The ancient Vrekoth healer's words were measured and careful. I was the loudest voice against human involvement on my world, Cross admitted. I called it foolishness, desperation. I said it would fail. He looked directly at Doyen. I was wrong. The humans saved 798 cubs who would have died. They endured violence, pain, and exhaustion to help children not their own, from species that could easily kill them. This is not manipulation. This is sacrifice, War Master Threx stood, his massive form commanding attention. The Vrekoth value strength above all. We respect warriors. We honor courage, but we learned something from the humans. He paused. Sometimes the greatest strength is choosing gentleness when you could choose violence. Sometimes the truest courage is patience when instinct demands action. The humans showed us this. They showed our children this. And our children are better for it. Dr. Minho was called to present his research. He pulled up charts and biological data. I've studied over 200 cases of human interaction with alien young, Minho explained. The results are consistent across species. Human presence reduces stress hormones, increases trust behaviors, and improves emotional regulation in traumatized or difficult young. But here's the critical finding. This effect is temporary. The young don't become dependent on humans. They don't prefer humans to their own species. Once they're healthy, they bond naturally with their own kind. He switched to a new set of data. I also studied the humans involved. What I found explains why this works. Humans evolved as cooperative breeders. Our species raised children communally, often caring for young that weren't genetically ours. This created strong selection pressure for cross-group empathy and patience. Humans developed the ability to read distress signals across many contexts and to respond with caregiving behavior. This ability, Minho continued, seems to work across species boundaries. Humans respond to universal distress signals, high-pitched sounds, specific movement patterns, proportions common to juvenile forms. Our brains are wired to care for vulnerable young, and that wiring doesn't limit itself to human children. A reptilian counselor challenged him. Then why only predator species? Why do their young respond so well to humans? Because predator species share more emotional range with humans, Minho explained. They have similar stress responses, similar bonding mechanisms. Prey species, with respect, often have different emotional structures. They're not better or worse, just different. Humans happen to be particularly compatible with predator species psychology. The final speaker was Hyejin. She hadn't planned to speak, but Doyen had convinced her. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she stood at the platform. "I'm not a politician," Hyejin began. "I'm not a scientist or a warrior. I'm a nurse. I take care of children. That's all I know how to do." She pulled up a video on the chamber's screens. It showed her in the isolation room on Kethera, working with an infected cub. The cub was violent, throwing itself at her, clawing at her suit. But Hyejin didn't leave. She just kept talking, kept humming, kept offering gentle presence. "This cub's name is Sina," Hyejin said. "She was 6 months old when the plague hit. She attacked anyone who came near. The Vrakoth healers said she would die because they couldn't treat her. But I thought, she's just scared. She's just a baby who hurts and doesn't understand why." The video showed Sina eventually calming, accepting treatment, finally sleeping peacefully in Hyejin's arms. "So I sat with her." Hyejin continued. "For 3 days I sat with her while she attacked me. I talked to her. I hummed to her. And eventually she understood I wasn't a threat. She let me help her." Hyejin's voice grew stronger. "Sina is alive today. She's healthy and happy, and I have scars from her claws that I'll carry forever. I don't regret any of it." Hyejin looked around the chamber. "You're afraid of what might go wrong. I understand, but I'm more afraid of what will go wrong if we stop helping. How many cubs like Sina will die because we were too scared to try? How many children like Packmother Venra's son will suffer alone because we valued protocols over compassion?" The chamber was silent when she finished. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, the coalition didn't ban human involvement with alien young. Instead, they created the Havelock Accords, a framework of guidelines and protections. Humans could volunteer to help with alien young, but couldn't be coerced or paid beyond reasonable expenses. All arrangements had to be voluntary and time-limited. Parents maintained primary authority. Humans would receive training and support. Oversight would ensure ethical practices. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. 5 years later, Doyen stood in a massive gathering hall on Earth. It was an anniversary celebration, marking 5 years since the Havelock Accords. Representatives from 47 different predator species attended, many with their children. The Vrakoth cubs he'd first helped were adolescents now, almost as large as their parents. Whisper approached him shyly. "I wanted to thank you," she said in careful, practiced human language. "I don't remember much from when I was small, but my parents told me you helped us when we were scared." "You were very brave," Doyen said. "All of you were." Blaze pushed forward, bigger and more confident. "Father says you showed us how to be strong without being cruel. He says that's an important lesson for warriors." Across the room, Tahir talked with a group of young Kirill. He was healthy and whole now, training to be a healer like his mother. When he saw Doyen, he waved enthusiastically. The formal program began. War Master Threk stood to speak, his armor polished and decorated. 5 years ago, Threk said, I did not understand humans. I saw them as weak, soft creatures without natural weapons or armor. I was wrong. He looked at Doyen. Humans possess a strength we predator species often lack. The strength to be gentle when instinct demands violence. The strength to be patient when nature demands action. The strength to love when evolution demands suspicion. He gestured to the crowd. We do not entrust our young to humans because they are weak. We entrust them because humans have a gift we need. They can reach our children when we cannot. They can heal wounds we do not know how to touch. They can teach our young to be both strong and kind. Packmother Venra spoke next. The Havelock Accords changed the galaxy. Over 5,000 humans now work as keepers.